Hello, everyone. Welcome to another graduate student talk here at the LIST Visual Arts Center. My name is Elizabeth Ponce, and I am the Public Programs Coordinator here at the LIST. We're really excited to have you guys here for tonight's talk. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is a gallery series that we do in which we invite MIT graduate students to come share their research with us or their work with us as it relates to our visual art exhibitions. So tonight we are in Lex Brown's Carnelian, and we are joined by Ardalan SadeghiKivi. And he will be sharing some of his work with us tonight. So Lex's show is a really cool exhibition that includes a 3-channel video installation as well as 4 large-scale paintings. And Ardalan's going to talk a little bit about his artistic practice and the work that he's doing here on MIT's campus. So without further ado, I'll let him take it away.
So, hello everyone. I'm Ardalan SadeghiKivi. I just graduated from the Master of Architecture program at MIT. And I'll just hint a little bit about what is my practice, what is it in dialogue with, and kind of introduce a few of the projects that I did within the last year. And then I'll relate it back to the show and kind of try to put my work and Lex's work into conversation. So if I want to kind of summarize what I do is I create computational interfaces to observe Bayesian beliefs, esoteric traditions, and occult practices. And by Bayesian beliefs, I mean the manner in which our brains are relating certain concepts and incidents together and conclude certain phenomena out of that. For instance, you might have done something that you think the god of oceans didn't like it, and suddenly the ocean starts like getting angry at you, and you might realize that if you do some sort of sacrifice, the ocean will kind of calm down, and you perform that, and the ocean calms down. So you start relating these kind of entities together, like sacrifice, gods, anger, all of these together. And my work kind of exists between material world and immaterial world. As I said, I create these computational interfaces, but eventually all of these processes manifest in sculptures, or not necessarily just the sculptures, paintings, spans over media. And yeah, so I'll start with a project of mine, the series called Stone Tape. And the story behind how this project kind of came to be is, in a way, in a nonlinear fashion. There were certain stuff happening on my mind, and I was being exposed to certain material. One of which was the intellectual history of cannibalism by Catalin Avremesco, where he kind of creates this systematic, in a way, structuralist book about history of the figure of cannibal within both classical period canon and also modern disputes that philosophers argue over, and kind of problematize this figure in different contexts, from private property ownership to the history of consumption. And the way he kind of creates these instances and delves into gave me kind of hints of like how can you systematically describe such a figure. And at the same time, I was also reading this about this phenomenon called stone tape, which is about mental impressions and kind of paranormal impressions being recorded on certain objects, such as stones. And Charles Babbage, for instance, argues in his 9th Bridgewater Treatise that the language when it is being spoken, it has an audio. But at some point in time, when you stop talking, the audio fades away, but the information that is being contained, but that audio stays around, and eventually it kind of gets recorded in certain objects such as the stones, and he hypothesized that with the advancement of technology, we might be able to kind of extract these data. At the same time, the third thing that I was being exposed to was the contemporary theory of metaphor by George Lakoff, the American linguist who was actually a professor at MIT, where he argues that unlike traditional ideas about metaphor, which was mostly attributed to something like poetry, that poets create metaphors and kind of underline meanings over and over, he argues that language itself, aside from linguistics, is being bounded by metaphors. So when we, for instance, say foothills, we are subconsciously imagining there is an entity as mountain that has a body. And on the bottom of it, there are foot, because this is the body, this is the foot, and therefore we have foothills. So there is a source domain, there is a destination domain, and metaphor helps this mapping of source to destination occurs. And all of these things combined made me think about whether there is such a structure that I can assemble that creates programs, computational programs, that are behaving cannibalistically. So using the ideas in George Lakoff, I assembled that kind of subject-object relationship between computer programs and cannibalism, that I have been borrowing a lot of those concepts from the intellectual history of cannibalism. And I create kind of very, very, I won't say basic, because they were written in assembly language, but in a way, basic computer programs that eat each other, devour each other. And they kind of conquer each other over the slots of memory in computers, RAM memory. And eventually, after this process is done, one program kills the other. So what I was thinking was, what would happen if the data resulting from the consumption and eventually eradication of the other program can be transmitted and stored on stones, basically creating stone tapes. So as you can see in the second image, here's how this project eventually got manifested in. On the left, you're seeing like stack of crates in which there are stones, and those stones are the ghosts of the computer programs that have been killed as a result of being cannibalized by another computer program. And in the middle, on the crate, you're seeing a live simulation of two other programs eating each other away. And on the right, you're seeing the kind of special box that has the antenna and the whole like blanket and wires that allows the data to be digitally transmitted and stored on the stones. And you can see in further pages different traces of cannibalistic acts performed by different programs over each other. Second project I would like to talk about is called Tulpa series. And Tulpa is a concept created and in a way adapted by two theosophists, Annie Besant and Charles Leadbetter, that they adapted it from Vajrayana beliefs about body emanations. And they had this idea about the existence of a universal matter that is kind of beyond what we see the world as, and this universal matter exists in every entity that is kind of existing over visible or invisible notions of world. And they kind of created this, in a way, color system that argued that, okay, there are certain emotions, certain instances that humans are going through, and each of those emotions and instances are creating certain tulpa around. In a way, like maybe something like aura around of them, and these tulpamancers were seeing how the subjects are going through these emotions and what are the colors emerging around them, and describing it to painters. And those painters were drawing those back, and then the result of this, in a way, esoteric research manifested in a book called Thought Forms, where you can see like a range of emotions and instances occurring, and they all like kind of different from each other. Like you can see like how the drawing of rage is different than drawing of coming up with an idea, for instance. Anyway, as I was kind of delving into this concept, I was thinking, okay, what would be tulpa now? And I realized that every emotion, every thought that all of us have are now existing over the internet. So everything exists there. And all of these things are, at the end, somewhat attributed to certain images. Like you might think of football, and when you search over the internet, there's like tons of images of football fields, soccer fields, all of that. And what was interesting to me was not just the images that exist, but how these images collectively have an essence. And by essence, I mean like with images existing on the internet, we are dealing with RGB, red, green, blue, and they combine and reveal, depend on what display mode you're using, a certain color. So the essence of these digital images are RGB. But I was thinking, what would be the essence in the material world? So I extracted these images affiliated with certain thoughts, certain existing concepts, and returned them back to their original RGB collective representation, and then returned that, transferred that into CMYK, which is the essence of materialistic pigment. So these kind of, I don't know what to call them, the schemes, these color schemes, are afterwards turned into stickers, and then I kind of stick those stickers to cardboards. And the reason is, as I was thinking that, okay, this is my version of tulpa, I should have found a way to kind of accompany my version of tulpa with my version of human, because tulpas were kind of emerging from human thoughts, human emotions. And to be honest, I didn't find anything more relevant to humans nowadays than cardboard boxes, things that kind of look similar, but come in different sizes. They're tagged with different things, but at the end of the day, they get filled, unfilled with random stuff, even though they kind of still maintain their shape and form, but they are constantly being filled and emptied with different things that might not have anything to do with their origins. So yeah, that's how this project kind of turned into the format that is currently existing as. And the third project is Seance series. I was in a discussion with my filmmaker friend, with whom I have collaborated a few times, about a movie called Pulse by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I don't get into the details of the movie, but basically the idea is ghosts have been invading the material world through the usage of internet. And this kind of created this idea to me that, okay, traditionally, both in entertainment, media, historical remarks, we're seeing that ghosts and spirits were being left on material, such as film material. So like these kind of Victorian spirit photography traditions that you see, you're seeing these like phantom figures in the background or in the foreground, like kind of being faded away, but in the end, those traces are left on film material, regardless of our questions regarding the source of existence of those spirits and phantoms. And then this thought came to my mind that, okay, now we are living in the age of pixels. So where did the ghosts go after that? And then I contacted my friend in Paris who works on restoring kind of old films or damaged films. And I asked whether there is an instance that they might have received some sort of seance session that might have been recorded on some old film, and now they have some sort of digitized version of that. And gladly, there was one. So I received that, and then I created an algorithm that kind of treats the digitized film and all of the frames that it is being encompassed with as one very, very, very long take, similar as photo finish technique that was used before the digital tools arrive and kind of enable us to understand, I don't know, for instance, in running competition, like horse riding competitions, which one finishes first, and some competitions were closed, so the naked eye couldn't detect. So they had created this kind of photo finish technique that allowed to kind of get an overexposed, continuous image of the couple of last seconds. So I kind of translated that analog technique into a computational algorithm that turns this digitized film into a very, very, very long image. And then I created and I implemented another algorithm to detect where are the phantom presences existing within this image, within this large image. And then started compressing that image to the smallest unit that a ghost can arguably live in. And this resulted in an image. And I use contact print technique to kind of return that ghost again back to material world, and yeah, and then they did manifest in the photos that you can see in the pamphlet. So I would say these were kind of a summary of a few of the projects that I've been working on within the past year. And now I would say some remarks about Lex Brown's work. Well, if you have already kind of experienced the show, you realize that the show is kind of predicting an encounter called the boom, which all three characters are kind of, the whole discussions between them are revolving around the boom. And what would eventually happen is that in a kind of Beckettian way, similar to the play Waiting for Godot, that all the characters are kind of anticipating the arrival of this character called Godot, but eventually he never arrives, we will never see the boom. And the film kind of loops back to itself. And in a way, the boom is representing some sort of catastrophe that at least, it could be an environmental catastrophe, and it could be many things. But what was interesting to me is that we never see the boom happening. And everything that is happening within this show is a kind of pre-boom incident. I would read my work as a post-boom, as existing in a post-boom era, in a way that in the pre-boom, which this show is kind of creating, we still see that the world has gloss, color, rhythm, poetry, meaning, which is probably the most important thing that it has. It has meaning. Even though it has layers of absurdity, it is still following and connecting magic, symbolism, through our understanding of meaning. But in my own work, that's why I call it's a post-boom kind of world. The catastrophe that has happened is not environmental. It's not social. It's pretty much linguistic. The catastrophe has happened to the language. Language has lost its meaning purely, and what is left for us to experience is syntax, function. That's why Even though I use a lot of layer of references from Western esotericism, Hermeticism, and they're all filled with magical symbolism, I still try to kind of digest them down to the functions that they can create. All of my objects that you might have seen, like either in the pamphlet or other places, they're all pretty functional objects. And that's where I think my work is in dialogue with Lex, is that that's a pre-boom era when we still have kind of space for color, meaning, rhythm, poetry. But in my work, I think our time is kind of up, and now we are seeing a post-boom era of everything coming down to its function. And in a way, in the display of my work, I have this tendency to depersonalize and try to experiment with each series, each work, different material, different way of representation. Even when the spaces of those work change, the same series might completely iterate in a different way. And that's, again, that comes from my personal experience of alienation that I have been, in a daily basis experiencing after my immigration. To be honest, it existed before that too. I find it really hard to belong within the environments that I kind of get placed in. But again, I realize that certain meanings have dissolved within these environments. And what we are left with is language only on the facade, communicating and connecting people together. It's all about networking. It's all about seeing, I don't know, what's the benefit of this? What's the benefit of that? It seems that the relationships don't go past that layer of language. And the semantics have kind of lost their meanings. That's where this whole idea of turning down everything to its function kind of comes from, to reflect my current existence within this world. And yeah, I will just finish this talk with a remark from Pier Paolo Pasolini. He has a writing in October magazine, October journal, and it's called Observations on Long Take. Basically, in part of the text, he points out that our life is like cinema is like it's like life. And our life is unpredictable. You don't know what is the next action that you're going to do until you die. And that's where your life kind of generates a meaning. Because before that, anything else can happen. And everything you had done before that might mean completely differently. But until you die, this meaning doesn't happen. And he kind of creates this analogy to film and montage, that film reaches its meaning after being montaged, after being edited, after it has a beginning, ending. And I would say the same thing about my work, that one of the reasons that I would like to avoid this oversaturation of meaning that we kind of now see in not just the art world, that everything is about description. No one cares about the work anymore. You just see the work, get something out of it, but mainly everything is about the description. How the work describes itself. What does it mean? How does it enable people to culture themselves through that description, through that meaning, through what the artist is being represented as. Representation of representation of representation. And all of these things, just a chaos. And I would say, this might be a little bit dark sentence to put out as a final remark, but I think in order to understand my work, you need to really get close to me and understand me first. And the only way to fully grasp this world is after I die, and you kind of put these all pieces that you have grasped through knowing me together, and turn it into an understanding of why I've been doing what I've been doing for as long as I remember. Thanks a lot for hearing me out, and enjoy the rest of your day.